How do you intensively and biologically produce real food? What are the production multipliers that you can use to take your production from what any gardener can get way up there? Using an integrated growing system, you can use a lot of things that impact this, but I'd like now to talk about the production multipliers. The use of these production multipliers is the art of growing. The method, well, we've talked about that, but the application of the various methods and materials is where the art comes in. That's the difference between just growing something and really making it grow. On the methods, there are 5 methods that we need to be aware of, and then we're going to switch over to materials, and we're going to talk about 7 materials. The first method is the method of tillage. I would suggest to you that the best method of tillage is to use raised beds and spade or use a broad fork. A broad fork is a faster way to spade, but you will increase your production by using this method by about 200%. Well, why would you do that? Part of it is going to be because your plant spacing is closer. Part of it is going to be that you have better germination. Part of it is going to be a more efficient use of water, less weeds, etc. But the other part that many people don't get into is the maintaining of biology, the fungus and the bacteria in the soil. What kills biology? Grinding it, otherwise known as tilling. Now, understand, I'm telling you the best case. You can decide, oh, but I just bought a brand new tiller. Okay, fine. Turn the tiller tines on real slow and the wheels on real fast and do it 3 or 4 times, and it's not near as bad as sitting there and just grinding it out. Okay? Understand, we're going to talk about mycorrhizal rhizomes, and that's a plant material. And the next one is transplanting. I use transplant trays. They have little holes in the bottom. They're slit. They tilt in toward the bottom. You can stick your finger up the bottom, and this whole cube with a transplant will come up, and you just transplant it right there. There are several things that are of advantage there. You can bottom water very easily. What you do is lay down 1-inch boards on a level concrete space, cover them with plastic, put your plant trays on there, and just water the plastic. Waters right up, wicks right up from the plastic. You don't have to worry about weeds. You don't have to worry about hitting your seedlings and knocking them over with the force of the water. But more than that, you can increase your production 50% just by using transplants. You ready? What you do is you think about it. How long is that plant going to sit in that transplant tray? Well, my transplant trays are about 12 by 24, something right in there. And they have about 72 plants in them, and they will spend 1/3 of their time in that transplant tray, getting ready to be transplanted. My bed space is saved by using those transplant trays because 1/3 of the time they're going to be sitting in those transplant trays. I took 30 trays and planted out a 30 by 100 foot greenhouse with 30 trays of transplants. They sat there. So we could increase our production 150%. Vertical growing, 300%. Have you ever seen melons in slings? They do it. Tomatoes we often grow vertically. We can grow a lot of things. The neatest thing is to grow it vertically up here, and the green beans or the squash or whatever are hanging down here, right ready to pick. That's a really neat way of doing it. Spacing. We can generally in a bed get 2 times the spacing for doubling our production. And when we use transplants, we can interseed our transplants with cover crops, because that transplant at this tall is going to beat that seed to harvest. So when you plant your transplants, you can scatter the seeds of a cover crop right in your beds, and the cover crop will start growing, and by the time you pick your crop, your cover crop will be ready, because your biology to stay alive needs what? Not only air, but food. You've got to feed that biology or it's going to starve. So if you take all the organic matter out of the soil and clean your garden up too good, the biology isn't going to have something to live on. Leaving methods, let's hop over to materials. Soil minerals will increase your production by 3 times. Balancing your soil, getting it right. Trace minerals will add another 2 to 3 times the production. Rock powders will increase production by almost 2 times, 180%. Biochar, terra preta. At the mouth of the Amazon years ago, they recognized that there had been a large city, and they had to have agricultural production to support that much population. And finally, some Australian researchers went down and they found pottery shards and biochar, biological material that had been charred, not ashed, charred, which sequesters the carbon for thousands of years. And what that does is that carbon holds and gives homes for all the biology, all the beneficial microbes, and not only that, it holds that aqueous nutrient solution of minerals in the root zone. If you don't hold it with something, it'll go right on down into the subsoil and be lost to your growing. So that organic matter, that biochar, holds it. And the studies that they have done shows that biochar can increase production from 3 to 8 times. Now, it's not practical to do this on a commercial basis, but you can make your own biochar. You can go on the web, you look for an atom retort, is what it's called, and the old method of making charcoal was you covered a burning pile of wood with dirt, and the fire went out, and you had 12 to 15% charcoal. An atom retort will have a production up around 42%. So it's about triple what the normal method of charcoal is. But it will have the ability to sequester those minerals in the root zone. Paramagnetic energy will make that plant sap pump faster. Biology will help you with disease and pests, but it'll also give you the beneficials on your plants, and it will increase it 3 times. Ormus materials are non-standard materials. They're 10,000 times more prevalent than their precious metal counterparts, but they have superfluidity, superconductivity, and they help the mitochondrial processes in the cells of plants and humans. So, what do you get? What does this look like? These are the tines on a Grillo. A Grillo is a 12 horsepower diesel tiller. It's a beast to work, but it has a mechanical spader, and the spader, instead of tilling, goes in and breaks the soil on a... Now, you can't do 10 to 12 inches on one pass, but after 2 or 3 passes, you can get 10 to 12 inches with this without any problem. So that would be preferred over a tiller. If you don't have that, you can use an orchard plow on a tractor or a plow and a double disc. Just don't disc it to death. Just do it so that it's sufficient and don't overdo it. There's the Grillo with a rotary plow on it. Where you're going to grow and under what conditions makes a lot of difference. If you have poor or no soil, you're going to want to optimize what you're growing. And you can do that with grow boxes, tanks, or containers, or recycled barrels. I have a friend who got a bunch of 55-gallon barrels, drilled some holes in the bottom for drainage. He has 75 of them, and he grows all the vegetables for his family of 6 in those barrels. It takes him half an hour of weeding a week to weed out all the weeds in the barrels, and most of that after that is picking or a little bit of watering. My bias when I'm planting is to plant directly into the soil. We know of certain nutrients. I'm not sure with the frequency of what we keep coming up with that we've discovered all of them or in the right concentration. So I kind of want it in the soil. So if there's anything left out in my growing medium, maybe it can get it out of the soil. And then you can have grow beds. You can double dig beds. You can have raised beds. All of those can contribute to growing in poor or less than optimum conditions. There's a transplant tray full of transplants. Now, I used to have a mechanical soil blocker, and I could mix up transplant medium, and I could level it out, and I could do 1,000 blocks an hour. I can tell you that that's a lot of stinking work. And if you use a transplant tray, you just mix up your medium a little bit, put a little water with it so it doesn't go right on down through the tray, and then you just put all that in a wheelbarrow, you scoop it up over the tray, tap it down 2 or 3 times, do it again, set it, and you can get 4,000 or 5,000 that way. Know it. I can make it work. So I use transplant trays to good advantage. When you do transplant, sunlight is a critical matter. You may decide you want to transplant on a cloudy day, not sunshiny day. You may want to decide that you do it in the evening to allow the plants to adjust. You probably want to put water in with your transplants, and you may do like some of the farmers do when they transplant, and that is use a phosphorus solution. Now it's real easy. You can go buy Tennessee brown rock. Now, Tennessee brown rock comes from down around Columbia, Tennessee. Those are the mine tailings from their making triple superphosphate and concentrating the phosphorus. And they had these mine tailings and they didn't know what to do with them, so they dug a hole with a bulldozer and put the mine tailings in them. Now we're digging them back up and we're buying it by the ton and we're using it. So you can make a slurry out of Tennessee brown rock and use that slurry. What I do is I take my transplant and I make a phosphate slurry. I set my whole transplant tray down in it, and then I have another same size that I put my mycorrhizal rhizomes on, and I just set it on that. And when I pop that sucker out and go to transplanting, it's ready to go. It's got everything. Here's some of the production that you can get. This is a Multiplier type garden. This, Jim, is my 5th year for doing the Multiplier method. Last year my church asked me to oversee it, so I did. The person who designed the garden made the aisles closer than the 3.5 foot recommended and buried the pipe, so we were committed. Nonetheless, we planted a 95 by 95 garden. We had a very wet and cold spring, so we didn't get things in until the last week of May and the first week of June. I thought I knew what to expect, but I didn't expect 7 tons of produce off of this with only 180 growing days. Several tons we just took out in the community. The garden team was so excited we were going to double it this year. Thanks for sharing it. You can go see this on Facebook at Canyon View Gardens. The post heading, the garden was 1/7 of an acre, produced 14,000 pounds of produce. People weren't highly trained, nor were they highly motivated. They weren't focused on growing the crops with the highest yields, but you can get 100 tons to the acre. But you can do better than the Multiplier method. And that's what this is based on. Here's some growing beds. You notice the vertical growing in the back. You notice the mature leaves are pretty much touching, shading the weeds out. You have to hunt for the weeds. That's okay. Hunt them, pitch them. You're good. You can walk in between it. See the little girl back there hidden in the garden? Just her face and shoulders sticking up. There's somebody with some, probably zucchini maybe, and some tomatoes. You notice the vertical growing there, more vertical. Ormus elements, monoatomic elements in a high spin state. These M-state elements have been observed to exhibit superconductivity, superfluidity, Josephson tunneling, and magnetic levitation. Define the rules, physical rules that we know. Cellular respiration is increased, enhance energy flow in the microtubules inside the cells. All sorts of positive results from using Ormus materials, found primarily in spring water and in the ocean. Application is easy and inexpensive, and these qualities, the qualities of mental clarity coming back from some of the mental fog of dementia and Parkinson's and some of those other things have been observed to be positively affected from Ormus. There's the terra preta of the Amazon basin. You don't need to have more than 30% biochar in your soil. You don't need to have more than 30% worm castings, because beyond that it's just excess without a decided increase of yield. Paramagnetism, all sorts of growth increased, but the label said 95 days seed to maturity. 30 days the corn was 6 feet tall, 40 days 9 feet, 50 days it was 12 feet, and on the 59th day we ate sweet corn with a Brix reading of 20. The Brix reading is basically the sugar that's involved in the corn itself. So a few days later, the harvested corn had Brix value from 24 to 30. So you get a better product. There's the biology. It's safe. You can take a bath in it if you want to. And there is the proof of the pudding. Corn that had percentage of the corn population with 2 ears per plant increased from 20% to 60%, with some plants bearing 7 to 9 ears filled out to the tip. And there you go. Non-approved method of measuring the height of your corn, but it works. They had wonderful yields and high protein content. There is John Evans in his garden in Palmer, Alaska. He holds the world's record for, he probably has 16 or 18 blue ribbon vegetable productions from the world. AlaskaGiant.com, TNJEnterprises.com. You can see him down there, that little thing in front of that teepee with the beans on it. The New Organic Grower. If you want resources in the area of nutrient-dense food, one of them, several of them come from the pen of Elliott Coleman. 4-Season Harvest, the Winter Harvest Handbook, the New Organic Grower, and Steve Solomon has written about nutrient-dense production as well. There's John Evans. There's a broccoli. That carrot on your right is a 18, 19 pound carrot. The beet down there is, I think, 35 pounds, and the zucchini is about 35 pounds, and I believe the broccoli, head of broccoli there is 30, 35 pounds. Interesting side note, John McGowan that markets Archaea was talking to John Evans in Alaska. And John Evans said, well, my largest cabbage was 43 pounds. Guy McGowan says, you need to be using my stuff. It'll help you. John Evans said, send me some. So he did. And his production on heads of cabbage went from 43 pounds to 110 pounds of cabbage. Now, I don't know what you do with a 110-pound head of cabbage. I guess the whole village has coleslaw. That's all, or sauerkraut or whatever, but it does work. There's John with one of those heads of cabbage and his wife, a turnip, beet, a couple of onions. It doesn't take many of those onions to make a pot of onion stew. These two trees were planted the same day 4 years prior, and the one on the right had Ormus washing water applied to the soil. These English walnuts were both, one is from an Ormus tree and one is from a normal tree. You'll notice the three normals weighed 31.7 grams. The three Ormus walnuts were 91.2 grams. There's a supermarket orange and a supermarket cantaloupe. And then down below is a supermarket orange and an Ormus orange. The Ormus orange is as big as a supermarket cantaloupe. Reminds me of a story about two guys with a stick and a cluster of grapes between them. It may not be so far-fetched after all. If you look at these production multipliers, that's the art, how you use it. If you add all those up, you have 2,980 times the production. Now, where do you get all this? How can I afford all this? Well, maybe you can't afford all this, and I understand that. I have no problem. I just wanted you to know the principles. Because if you can get organic matter, make compost, use rock dust, use biology out from somebody's good garden that you know is biologically active, that they haven't commercially fertilized and sterilized, that's not compacted. Use seaweed. If you're by the ocean, go get seaweed. Throw it on your garden. Throw it in your compost pile. Do those things that you can do. If you can buy some of these things, so be it. But if you can't, don't be discouraged, because I'm here to tell you, I'm amazed. You look at that rock bluff with that one pine tree growing out of that crack in the rock, and see if there isn't a good Father up above that looks out. There are all sorts of resources. My encouragement to you is be a good student. Look at Canyon View Gardens. Look at their Facebook page. Peaceful Valley Farm Supply has a lot of ideas. Acres USA talks about humic substances. Mittleiter gardening books, there's some stuff there. Agricultural sea salt. Ormus on my plants. Harmony Gardens is the website for the energy. And Bounty, the Market Gardener, if you want to do this on a commercial basis, the Market Gardener by Jean-Martin Fournier, and then The Lean Grower is a good book to organize your growing if you want to do it from a production standpoint.